Kaikeyi, Chapter 4. Yuddhajit and I passed the first months of our mother's departure in this way, straddling that strange space that precedes adulthood. I was trying to prove to the women of the court that I was a woman myself, even though I did not feel or act like one, and Yuddhajit was trying to earn his way into our father's confidence. Although he had little idea what the men of the palace really did when they were not out fighting. One afternoon, about a year after my mother left, my father announced to us that a week hence we would travel to the Saraswati river to pay tribute. There had been rumors of a Rakshasa hiding in the northern foothills, where sparse herding villages dotted the rocky outcroppings. Each tale brought to the court was more fanciful than the last, that the Rakshasa lived in a village and raided their neighbors, that the villagers worshipped the Rakshasa for his protection, that some of the humans had begun drinking the blood of the Rakshasa's victims just as the Rakshasa did. But it was indisputable that one of my father's own scouts had seen the demonic ugliness of the Rakshasa, and that any Rakshasa walking our land was a threat. Rakshasas were demons, though not as powerful as Asuras. They satisfied the evil in their hearts by stalking humans rather than gods. I had only heard about them from scrolls and in Manthara's tales. Rakshasas ate misbehaving children, slaughtered those abandoned by the gods, but we all knew they still walked the outskirts of civilization. And so my father thought it best to obtain the blessing of a goddess before facing the monster. The Saraswati was the source of many blessings for our people. Women went there to pray and 9 months later were gifted with sons. Warriors who stood in the Saraswati and asked for strength returned from battles where greater men died. But most of all, the river was known for granting visions to the most learned of sages, who used their knowledge of things to come to avert disasters. They would see a rising flood and pray to the gods to change its course, or foretell a poor crop and pray for better harvest. When their visions did not come to pass, the kingdom was grateful for their work. Saraswati prized intelligence above all else. And for this reason, I prayed to her daily as a young girl. It was due to this river that Kaikeyi was the powerful kingdom it was. Our sages had used the knowledge granted by the goddess to ensure our people remained holy, and in return we had her favor. It had been some years since we had last visited the river, for with a royal retinue the trip could take several weeks there and back. My brothers and I greeted the announcement with great enthusiasm. While traveling, we all got to ride and play and sleep together in tents with no lessons and other responsibilities. But the last time we had visited the Saraswati, my mother had still been with us, and as I thought of traveling without her, a strange loneliness came over me. Manthara would not be attending, for she did not like to ride. And so one evening, when Neeti came to my quarters, a small silver platter of such sugared almonds and pistachios in her hands, and a story ready on her lips, I asked her, "Will you come with me to the river?" Her face fell instantly. "I'm sorry, Rivratni, I have not been asked to go." "That is quite all right, I could arrange for it," I said confidently. She shook her head. "Even if you could, I would not wish to go." "It would be fun," I wheedled, slipping into the binding plane as I did. Our orange cord had about the thickness of a thumb, and I sent a simple message through it in a slow, steady pulse. "We will travel with the whole retinue." Despite my work in the binding plane, though, Neeti shook her head. "I really am sorry, Yuvratni. Perhaps someone else can accompany you. I know a girl, Shruti, in the kitchens. You would like her." Frustrated, I gave another tug on the cord. It started to move up and down more quickly, gathering speed, as I said, "Neeti, I'm asking you for this, please." Now that I had an idea in my hand, I would not be so easily dissuaded. "I really do want to come," she said quietly, and I assumed victory was near. After all, with the binding plane on my side, I could not fail. Then Neeti shook her head. "But I can't." In the binding plane, the cord between us was just a blur of orange movement. I was sure that soon she would acquiesce. "I'm asking us as your Yuvratni that you attend to me." Neeti's expression hardened from regret into anger, and then in an instant the cord reached its highest peak and snapped. I stumbled back, forgetting for a moment that the bond was not in the real world. Around us, the shattered remains of the cord drifted like orange ash, and my heart hammered in my throat. What had just happened? Niti took a step towards me and hissed, "My mother is very sick. Just because your mother left you, you does not mean everyone else's world is the same." And with that, she upturned the plate of sweets onto me, her kind eyes sharp with fury, and disappeared out the door. I stood there, unable to believe what had happened, repeating the events in my head over and over. I had seen hatred in her eyes as she left. In my mind's eye, I could see her face clouding over with ugly anger directed at me. My stomach churned, and I re entered the binding plane, hoping to find this had all been a silly nightmare. But our orange bond was nowhere to be seen. A tear slipped down my face, my vision blurring as the plane disappeared, but I brushed it away. It was stupid to cry over a servant who would turn on me so readily. But she had been more than that. She had been my friend, one of the few I'd had, and this was my own fault. For it had been a normal enough request, and even if she had not wished to listen, that would not have ordinarily warranted such a reaction. The only thing out of the ordinary was that I'd used the binding plane. Rather than merely annoying her, it appeared as though I'd broken our connection. Did this mean, then, that my friendship with Niti was over forever? That there was nothing connecting us anymore? Surely the effects of overusing the plane would not be so severe, and yet at potentially great consequence to herself. She had whispered those hateful words to me, years of friendship gone in an instant and over something so unimportant. I had to be exceedingly careful about using the plane on those I cared about. What if I had accidentally done this with my father, or Mantra, or Yuthajit? Just the thought brought an taste of acid to my mouth. My hands shook. How could I have been so foolish? I should have known better than to use this power without thought, without knowing its full extent. I would have to go to the Saraswati alone. It was what I deserved. For the first few days of our ride, I was subdued. Yuthajit tried to pull me into mischief, but all I could think about was Niti. Every day I checked for our bond, but I found nothing. But eventually the shock of it faded, and I joined Yuthajit, Shantanu, and Mohan racing through the camp in the evenings, chasing one another and shrieking with laughter. I revelled in the freedom I was afforded, for my opportunities to play with my brothers were becoming more and more scarce. We ran in and out of the forests near our camps, the air under the leaves cool and refreshing after a sweaty day of riding. We tried to catch small creatures, squirrels and little grey rabbits, and climbed up the branches of the smaller trees. The day before we were due to arrive at the river, Yuthajit snuck into my tent and shook me awake. As the only royal girl, I slept alone with a guard posted outside the front of my tent, but clearly nobody had thought to protect the back flap. I had been in the throes of a nightmare that was already slipping away, and perhaps it was the adrenaline already coursing through me that made me hear him out instead of going back to sleep. "The soldier said that an elephant was seen in these forests not too long ago," he whispered. "I want to go find it. Come with me?" Yuthajit knew as well as I that elephants did not live in our kingdom. They lived in the south of Bharat, far from our cooler climates. They must have been joking. "No, they said it was one of the elephants of the gods." His voice grew more excited as he spoke. "A white elephant." My eyes widened. White elephants were incredibly rare, and even seeing one at a distance was considered a great blessing. The story said that the first white elephant had risen out of the churning of the ocean, but it was in the middle of the night and we were in unfamiliar forests. "Come on, Kaikeyi," he cajoled. "Nobody will know." I could never resist Yuthajit for long. I shooed him out and quietly pulled on a dark kurta before joining him outside. It was a few days before the full moon, so there was ample light to navigate by, but the cold silver glow gave the forest an eerie cast. I suppressed a shiver and followed Yuthajit as he confidently plunged into the woods. "How do you know where to go? Elephants need water, right? We have to find a pool." As far as I knew, Yuthajit had no interest in geography. "This is a huge forest. We are searching for one animal within it." I turned and looked back around the camp, which was nearly obscured by the tall trees, their branches swaying slightly in the wind. "Are you certain about this?" "I am praying to find it," Yuthajit said. You should be praying to Lord Ganesha too. With his guidance, I'm sure we'll be blessed to see it. I stared at Yutajit's back for a moment, envious of his easy confidence, then I followed him. We remained silent as we marched, wary of garnering the attention of any passing predators. At some point, we twined our fingers together, not wanting to get lost in the darkness caused by the thick canopy. Just when my feet were beginning to tire, I was going to suggest we turn back. Yutajit gave a soft gasp. My eyes widened. White elephants were incredibly rare, and even seeing one at a distance was considered a great blessing. The story said that the first white elephant had risen out of the churning of the ocean. But it was the middle of the night, and we were in unfamiliar forests. Come on, Kaikeyi, he cajoled. Nobody will know. I could never resist Yutajit for long. I shooed him out and quietly pulled on a dark kurta before joining him outside. It was a few days before the full moon, so there was ample light to navigate by. But the gold-silver glow gave the forest an eerie cast. I suppressed a shiver and followed Yutajit as he confidently plunged into the woods. How do you know where to go? Elephants need water, right? We have to find a pool. As far as I knew, Yutajit had no interest in geography. This is a huge forest. We are searching for one animal within it. I turned and looked back towards the camp, which was nearly obscured by the tall trees, their branches swaying slightly in the wind. Are you certain about this? I am praying to find it, Yutajit said. You should be praying to Lord Ganesha too. With his guidance, I'm sure we'll be blessed to see it. I stared at Yutajit's back for a moment, envious of his easy confidence. Then I followed him. Once more, we remained silent as we marched, wary of garnering the attention of any passing predators. At some point, we twined our fingers together, not wanting to get lost in the darkness caused by the thick canopy. Just when my feet were beginning to tire, and I was going to suggest we turn back, Yutajit gave a soft gasp. Do you hear that? I strained my ears and after a moment heard the soft murmur of water. A stream! We rushed forward with new energy. Soon we could see light glinting off running water. Slow down, he whispered. If it's here, we don't want to scare it. But as we stepped cautiously towards the tree line, my spine tingled and a chill ran through me. Something was very wrong. I moved in front of Yutajit, trying to tell myself I was being irrational, and peered between two thick trunks. I stuffed my thumb in my mouth and bit down to keep myself from shouting, flinging out my other hand to hold Yutajit back. We have to go, I whispered. What is it? He asked, jostling me slightly to see. I clapped a hand over his mouth so he couldn't make a sound, and felt his body stiffen against me. On the other side of the stream stood a Rakshasa. It could not have been anything else. It was tall, taller than even some of the young trees that lined the water, with orange-red skin that gleamed unnaturally slick in the moonlight. Its skin matched its eyes, orange pupils and yellow where there should have been white. It had horns breaking through the skull like some fiendish ram, and from here I could see the sharp curve of two wicked white fangs protruding from its lip. It had 4 arms, each hand gripping a different weapon, casting twisted reflections in the water. And where it should have had feet, it instead had clawed paws, hairy and grotesque with sharp talons. Even many years later, it would have been impossible for me to describe the naked fear that filled me at the sight. This monster could rip me limb from limb and drink my blood without a second thought. The frightening stories had not been frightening enough. But just as suddenly as the fear came, it was replaced by clear thought. We needed to get away. I took a careful step backward and then another. Yutajit remained standing, paralyzed. I tugged at his hand. It's crossing the stream, he whispered. There was no time to spare on words. I pulled him this time hard enough that he fell into me, though I maintained both our balances. This seemed to be enough to wake him from his trance, for his hand clasped mine more tightly as we backed away one step after another. Behind us came a mighty roar, and we broke into a run. I imagined the earth itself was shaking. I did not know if it heard us running, but we did not dare turn round for anything. My chest ached and my lungs screamed for air. When I felt as though I would falter, Yutajit pulled me on. At long last, we burst into clearing where we had made camp. behind my tent once more. We stood there panting for several seconds, gulping in the air, before I could gasp out, "We must tell our father if it comes to the camp." I could not finish the sentence. "We have plenty of soldiers," Yutajit said. "If they are prepared, they could slay it." "But they are not prepared." Yutajit's mouth twisted into a grim expression, and then he set off without a word towards the center of camp. "We must see the Raja immediately," Yutajit said, drawing himself up as tall as he could get outside of our father's tent. The soldier guarding his tent seemed unimpressed. "It is the middle of the night, Yuvaraja. You can speak with him in the morning." "We must speak to him now," Yutajit said. Before I would have ordered the soldier to do so in the binding plain, but now I simply waited with Yutajit, afraid to use the plain after what I had done to my bond with Niti. The soldier held Yutajit's gaze for another moment, then nodded sharply and entered the tent. Yutajit turned to me, reaching for my hair and pulling a leaf from it. I gave him a small smile, just as the soldier returned to beckon us in. Our father was standing, still in his sleeping clothes, looking quite annoyed. "What is it at this hour?" "There is a Rakshasa coming towards the camp," Yutajit said confidently. My father raised his eyebrows. "And how would you know this?" To my ears, his tone sounded slightly mocking. Yutajit turned towards me, the panic evident. We could not admit to sneaking out of camp, but we had to give our father proof. "I had a dream about it," I blurted. "You woke me about a bad dream?" Anger was seeping into my father's tone. "I had it too," Yutajit said quickly. "We both had the exact same dream about a Rakshasa with orange-red skin and forearms headed towards us. That could only be a message from the gods." My father rubbed his chin, thoughtful. I clenched my hands at my sides. Of course, my father believed Yutajit's identical story without as much as considering what I had to say. "There have been reports of some horrible monster terrorizing nearby villages. I thought it was a wild animal, but..." He broke off and strode towards the front of the tent to have a hushed conversation with the soldier there. Then he came and clapped Yutajit on the shoulder. "You have done well to come to me about this. Did the gods see fit to show you where it was?" "There's a stream in the forest," Yutajit said, "to the south. It comes from there." "Good boy," my father said. "Stay here. I will lead a party to put an end to this monster." At that moment, a servant came in and wordlessly began helping my father into his armor. Outside, we could hear the sounds of others conversing despite the dark hour. The whispers were growing, and I imagined the news spreading like wildfire from tent to tent, the camp rousing to the sound of weapons being prepared. Once our father had departed, I sank to the earth floor of the tent, suddenly exhausted. Even the anger at my father was gone, for now he was marching to a fight, a Rakshasa. My eyes pricked, thinking of the danger we had been in, and the danger our father would soon be in. Yutajit sat next to me, looking equally afraid. We sat for what seemed like an eternity and must have drifted off, because the next thing I knew, a clamor was echoing all through the camp. Yutajit sprang to his feet, racing for the tent entrance. He ran straight into our father. "You were right, Yutajit," he said. His face was frightening in its grimness. There was a Rakshasa in that forest, and he looked to be coming for our camp. We were able to slay him, but not without a cost. "What cost?" Yutajit looked stricken. "We lost 3 men. My father's voice was weary. "We will cremate them at Saraswati River. We are lucky this was a weak Rakshasa, barely capable of intelligent thought. The gods smiled upon us to give warning. We would have lost more than 3 had the demon made it here. You have done well, my son. I will think on how to reward you." I glanced at Yutajit, wondering if he would mention me at all, but he just inclined his head and said, "Thank you, father." Father gave him a genuine smile, the kind that transformed his face. "You are quite welcome. Now make preparations to leave. We will still ride this day." We left together. Outside, I spun to face Yutajit, unsure what to say. He smiled, tired but relieved. "I'm so glad you were with me." He walked away, not even waiting for me, as I stood there dumbfounded. No thanks for saving him at the stream or covering our disobedience, not even an apology for father's oversight. But then, this was the way of the world to Yutajit, and standing there, I knew I would never truly grow accustomed to it. The next day, our somber party reached the banks of the river. As relieved as we were to have survived, the deaths of the men weighed heavily on us all. As we approached the water, silence fell over our group, a sort of mounting anticipation. Even though I'd never seen it before, the sight of it took my breath away. A clear white and blue ribbon weaving through the hills, its current dancing in the wind, seemingly playful but swift enough to carry unsuspecting travelers to their doom. Standing barefoot, my toes pressing into the damp earth and the sound of the water surrounding me, I was gripped once again by the urge to pray. Around me, people were kneeling next to the water, cupping it in their hands and pouring it on their heads, each absorbed in their own rituals. The sages were preparing to perform the funeral rites, to ask for the river to bless my father. I stepped forward, feeling uncertain until I reached the edge of the water. For once, I knew nobody would scold me for getting my dress muddy. Sri Saraswati, I pray to you for wisdom, I whispered. I glanced around, but nobody was near enough to hear me speak so softly. I ask you for knowledge of my gift. Why do I have it? What am I meant to do with it? I shut my eyes so tightly that I could not even see the redness of sunlight behind my eyelids. There was some small hope still inside me that now, after helping to save our camp, the goddess might see fit to bless me. I waited for a vision, for a spark, but nothing came. Please, I begged. I have always prayed and tried my hardest to be good. Please give me a sign. Help me to understand how to use it. Even then I thought of Neeti, of her face and what I had done. But Saraswati did not seem inclined to help me fix what I had broken. There was silence, save for the rustling and murmuring of those around me. A breeze blew down the river, pricking my skin. I unclasped my hands and rubbed my arms, abandoning the last bit of hope that the goddess might listen to me. The sages began ringing their bells, and I rose to my feet, rubbing at stinging eyes. Slowly I walked back towards the horses, knowing father would not notice. Are you okay? Yutajit asked from behind me. I whirled around. I'm fine. Where had he come from? He should have been with father. You should go back. You looked sad, he said instead. I wanted to check on you. Is it what happened with the Rakshasa? No, I said, I'm fine. There was no way for me to explain to Yutajit what was truly wrong. How could he understand what it was like to be ignored? But Yutajit wouldn't leave. I felt a flicker of annoyance that he would not let me have the solitude until he said, Do you miss her, mother? Last time we came here, she was with us. I miss her too. I blinked at him, surprised at the sudden show of emotion. I suppose, I said, though I hadn't been thinking of my mother at all. He put a hand on my shoulder, his warm touch chasing away some of the abandonment I felt. It'll be all right. I know that, I said, pulling away and swatting at him. He laughed for a moment, then grew serious. Do you want to rejoin the others? I shook my head. You go on, though. Is there anything I can do? He asked. He seemed sincere, but all of a sudden I remembered there was something I wanted from him. There is, I said. Whatever it is, I'll do it, he said immediately. I looked behind him to where the ceremony was well underway. You need to go now, but when we return to the palace, if you remember your promise, I'll tell you.